Hi, I'm Valerie Powers-Smith, partner at SBEMP Attorneys. We are proud to be the title sponsor of the Palm Springs Life and Coachella Valley Economic Partnership Series, The Economic Future of the Coachella Valley, a webinar series that focuses on the most critical industries that drive our economy and how to navigate the effects and opportunities of the changing economy. Today, our series focuses on arts, culture, and entertainment. Our museums and performing arts centers, as well as events like Modernism Week, Desert X, and the Palm Springs International Film Festival, are vital to tourism and therefore the region's economy. We have an incredible panel of speakers to discuss this important topic. We will begin with Louis Grachos, Executive Director and CEO at the Palm Springs Art Museum. Then we will talk with Chris Mobley, CEO of Modernism Week. And finally, Ron Celona, Founding Artistic Director of Coachella Valley Repertory. Louis, Chris, and Ron, thank you so much for joining us today. Louis, we're going to start with you. Arts and media have reported that 1 in 3 museums around the globe may close for good. How is Palm Springs Art Museum's financial health at this point in the pandemic, and what short and long-term strategies are you pursuing to remain vital?
Great. Hi, Valerie, and thank you for including us in this panel. I think museums worldwide are actually very much challenged during this incredible and complex pandemic that's really plagued the world, and it's certainly impacted cultural institutions in significant ways. There's no question that most museums that have not benefited from large and ambitious endowments are very much in jeopardy in terms of their ability to function as they have in the past. And in some cases, several museums are really stressed to the point where they really won't be able to reopen until they recover and find the funds to do that. The Palm Springs Art Museum does have an endowment, although it's an endowment that really, really can't sustain us throughout a long stretch of period or a long period of time without reopening. Our biggest challenge today is actually we have no way of earning income. So if you think about the fact that we have no admissions, we don't have any ability to rent our beautiful Annenberg Theater and rent our spaces out, as we have come to rely on the years of rental income coming through the museum. Obviously, retail from our 2 stores at the Architecture and Design Center and our main museum building, we have no income coming in there. So we've really had to rely on our dedicated membership, our endowment, and our board of directors, who are our primary funders for the museum. And we've really had to put a lot of things on hold, exhibitions, programs. We've unfortunately had to go into a period of really reducing our workforce. So my challenge is both short-term and long-term. And the short-term is that I had to address the issues immediately by beginning a process of really focusing on reducing our expenses for next fiscal year. Really look at a campaign that we established to essentially called Restart, which was to reopen the museum. And we've talked to our strongest donors and supporters to help raise those funds. We're exploring deaccessioning as a vehicle to raise some additional funds to enhance the endowment, which is a very important program. And then just in terms of finding ways to be resourceful, so we're relying more heavily on virtual technology for our programming and keeping our membership engaged through a variety of different channels through the virtual world, and primarily through online exhibitions and a focus on our permanent collection, where we select artworks of the week and talk about in depth how that happened, how those works came into our collection, just to keep everyone engaged with our program. But to answer your question, it's a very difficult time for our museum, but I think with all the measures we're taking short term, we'll be able to ride through this period and hopefully reopen sometime in the fall, which is our goal.
So the museum has 4 properties. You have the main museum, the Architecture and Design Center, the Palm Springs Center, and the Frey House. Could you talk to us about the state of each property and whether each will reopen in the fall?
In general, yes, to answer your question. In fact, our main museum, we're not only putting more emphasis on exhibitions that are coming out of our permanent collection, we have long anticipated an exhibition featuring Agnes Pelton's work, which is currently at the Whitney Museum. We are the last of 3 venues for that exhibition, and that'll open at hopefully mid-November at the museum. And she is an incredibly powerful painter who really moved to the Valley in the 30s and became one of the great transcendental painters, and is being celebrated with great international and national acclaim today, including the New York Times reviewing the Whitney show. So the main building will hopefully be reopened. Our restaurant will function and have a practice that will respect social distancing. We won't be able to create events that bring great people together. So the Annenberg, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do lectures, programs, and music and films in the Annenberg until we really feel confident and that the our guidelines from both the county and the state make that a possibility. The Architecture and Design Center will open with Jim Iserman, who is currently on view. His exhibition was cut short, and that our plan is to open the Architecture and Design Center when we reopen the museum. The Frey House is actually, we still are able to accommodate small tours of 1 and 2 and 3 people. So the Frey House will definitely be in the mix once we reopen. And in Palm Springs, we are in the midst of renegotiating our relationship with Palm Desert. But the one thing that we have asked Palm Desert, the city of Palm Desert, to approve is a long-term lease to reinforce our relationship through the Sarkowski Sculpture Park. That's our outdoor sculpture park that we have on view now. We want to continue that. We will not be programming at the Galen. That isn't an official announcement yet, but that is something that we're really slowing down the program in Palm Desert, just because we just don't have the resources to do that at this point. But we hope to be operational, but the operations will and the visitations will be very different. We're going to have time ticketing. We're going to practice social distancing. We're going to put in measures where we'll be very strategic and careful in how the exhibitions are installed to ensure that there's no gathering and really keep things moving. So it'll be a very different experience when we reopen until we get through this pandemic. So we're addressing all those issues as we hopefully open sometime in mid to late November.
Right. You've talked earlier about the different funding sources, and so one would presume that you've had to make some budgetary cuts. And so how does that affect your staff? And when looking towards reopening, how are you going to deal with having the staff that you need given the balance of that in the budget?
Well, it's an important question, and it's unfortunate that we've really, as part of our short-term management approach to our current situation, is that we've had to reduce our workforce. And frankly, that's painful in terms of an operation like ours, because we so much rely on our talent and our staff and our volunteers to really help us with the operation. But we've reduced our staff somewhere between 38 and 40%. And that's a very dramatic shift in our operation. But to just give you a sense of the steps we've had to take, and we're really moving the operation from approximately $11 million to closer to $6.5 million. So that's a tremendous reduction in operational costs. And frankly, I see that in play for the next 2 or 3 years. I think we really have to, our priority as stewards of this museum is to ensure its stability and its future. And so the drastic measures we have to take in the short term are really to ensure the long-term health of the museum, which I'm committed to. the Palm Springs Art Museum is such an important fabric of our cultural tourism industry. It's an important factor for those of us who live and grow up here in the Valley, and that's our number one priority. So, in other words, our programming might be a lot more modest and much more focused on celebrating our terrific collection, not engage in large-scale touring exhibitions that tend to really, draw, critical resource from the operation, and we just can't afford that. However, I'm very fortunate because our museum, unlike many other regional museums, has a terrific permanent collection that is all about exploring and rediscovering. And our curatorial team has done a great job thinking ways of really creating exhibitions within the context or using the permanent collection to keep our visitors excited and interested and frankly learning more about our permanent collection. So I'm embracing the idea that we're going through a cycle where we're going to be relying more heavily on permanent collection work.
So you already touched on the question that I was going to ask next in terms of if the exhibitions were going to be coming more from your permanent collection versus the traveling. And so is that something that the museum is looking at for the institution's survival and trying to acquire more to come into the permanent collection for the next couple of years?
Yes. I mean, we're very fortunate. We, as a museum, although we are certainly not acquiring work with resources these days, we've been benefiting from outstanding gifts from patrons, not just from the region, but even nationally, for decades. And frankly, that continues. In fact, we just recently, were gifted some major contemporary works that really will support and enhance our permanent collection. So I actually embrace the idea. In previous positions, I've always really embraced the concept of being creative with your permanent collection. It's a great way to teach. It's a great way to engage your community and to learn about the collection. We have a very, in fact, we just published, which you can find online on our website, a beautiful essay and report on how our collection grew over the years and how key donors made transformative gifts to the museum that really helped build this great collection. So I'm going to embrace that. I think our community will be pleasantly surprised. And my goal is that if once we're up and running, that if you come back to the museum 3, 4, or 5 times during the year, that you're going to see very different things from our collection on view. And it's a practice I employed at the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo, New York, which has one of the great 20th century and contemporary collections in not just the country, I think in the world. And it was always very surprising to me that our curators when I inherited that role of director, I challenged our curators to be much more creative and ambitious in presenting the permanent collection with new ideas and using perhaps a new acquisition or a topic to really create and organize exhibitions out of the permanent collection that would engage our community. And it was wonderful to be able to go into the collection and bring out works that hadn't been seen in decades. So you had this like freshness of our audiences coming in to the museum and, commenting that, oh my God, I didn't know the museum owned this work. Or, boy, we haven't seen that work since 1968. And I've already seen evidence of that here in Palm Springs with our collection when we, in our hopes to celebrate the Agam show that Sunnylands is presenting, and we lent a number of works to the show that's opening this fall at Sunnylands. We brought out our op art collection from that generation of artists, and 2 of our trustees who've been with the museum for over 25 years commented that they had not seen 3 of the paintings that were on exhibit ever. So, to me, this is an exciting opportunity for us to explore, embrace, and celebrate our permanent collection. So I think our visitors, once we reopen, although we won't have that rapid fire of sequential touring or special exhibitions, we will have an exciting mix of new ideas coming out of our permanent collection, I think will really surprise our audiences.
Opportunity is the word that I kept hearing in my head when you were talking about that, of how you find a positive in the negative that is this pandemic. And the enthusiasm that you describe of working with the permanent collection is very exciting. So while we're talking about opportunities and how you focus differently, let's talk about your fundraising efforts. Everyone knows Palm Springs Museum has large fundraising. How do you see that playing out this year?
Yes, it was a challenge because most of those events are about bringing people together. So we all decided, and with great enthusiasm, that we were going to do our two major fundraisers for next year and next season around virtual events. So they're both virtual events. Art Party, which normally would have been a big dinner for 400 people in our museum, is now going to be a virtual event, and it'll be premiering a new performance artwork by the artist Jeffrey Gibson, a Native American artist who you may remember from his first major installation at Desert X 1. And that artwork, which is a beautiful windmill blade that sits in our courtyard at the Palm Springs Art Museum right now, is going to, he will unveil or premiere this new performative artwork, which will also include new objects that he's created for the settings, and it'll be a first-time event and broadcast nationally. It's also, I'm very proud of this because we are commissioning the work. And in addition to that, he's providing a special edition art piece that'll be distributed to our major funders as part of their gift for supporting the event. And then we're going to have a couple of surprises and performances at the end of it that I can't reveal right now, but I'm very proud of it. And I have to say, our supporters have embraced the idea. So that is our first major fundraiser, for which is scheduled for December 4th. The second is an art auction, which again, we were actually hoping that it could be a gathering occasion where we could have an event, and we had a wonderful plan to do a drive-in art auction, which I'm hoping we might do in a couple of years. But we've already decided, and we're working with Sotheby's in New York to do a virtual art auction. And again, that committee's been formed, and we've already started working toward that, and that'll take place on March 9th. So we've really jumped right into the virtual world, and I'm happy to say that our donors and our supporters have really embraced the idea. Understanding the challenges of raising funds during this COVID period, it was really reassuring and exciting for us to understand that people were open to new ways of raising funds for the museum.
Well, that's exciting. So last question for you, Louis, the obvious. With COVID-19, how is that going to affect museum goers, and what can visitors expect when you are reopened?
Yes, I mean, one thing that we will, when we reopen, we will have time ticketing. We'll be setting up, testing sites that I think will be really simple and straightforward. We've invested in 2 video screens, which will take your temperature as soon as you walk in front of them. Of course, the design of the exhibitions will be to accommodate preventing any gathering spaces or, clustering opportunities for our visitors. And we're going to limit the number of people at the museum at any given time. So we're thinking per hour that we won't really be able to accommodate more than 80 people at a time. And that reflects a lot of research nationwide. Most museums that are operating today are operating at about 25% capacity. We're looking at our colleagues in New York and San Francisco and Chicago who have now really tested the model, and the overarching consensus is that time ticketing is critical, and also really limiting the number of people that can come to the museum any given day, and that seems to be working for them. So it will be a very different experience, but I think nothing replaces standing in front of an art object or experiencing an installation. You really can't substitute that. It's vital to to the human experience. There's just certain things that don't have the same impact or meaning through the virtual world. And so we think we're going to have a lot of enthusiasm when we reopen. I think many people have called us and told us how much they miss the museum and visiting the museum. So we're going to do everything we can to be efficient, safe, and really respecting the guidelines that we need to adhere to get through this pandemic.
Well, it sounds like you all have done your research, and as a fellow art lover, it's very nice to hear that you've done that so that people can get back to art, because as we all know, it's very healing as well. So thank you so much, Louis. So Chris, we're going to move on to you and talk about Modernism Week. So much of modernism, from the show and the sale to the home tours, lectures, and parties, are built around group experiences. What are you learning as you're planning going into the fall, and what are you hoping for your big event in February?
Well, hi, Val. First of all, thanks for having us on here. And it's a really interesting question. When I talk about Modernism Week over the years, I talk about the challenges that we see every year. And as you can imagine, going from 14 events 10 years ago to 350 different events this last year, we're always learning how to deal with challenges, whether the challenges are incremented weather, the weather changes, we have to make an immediate change. We've had times where a house has fallen through at the very last minute, where we're scrambling to try to find another event to replace that or a way to refund people. So, these kind of challenges aren't really new to our consultants and our staff at Modernism Week. And I think the good thing about the fall preview is that we have a new challenge. And it's learning the virtual world. It's learning about Zoom. It's learning about new ticketing procedures and production. And while it's, not the best situation for us, it's definitely a learning experience, and thinking outside of the box is what we do well. And so coming into the fall preview, we are doing virtual tours. We're bringing back some of our infamous houses here in Palm Springs. We're going to be walking through and showing people, a little bit more detailed, different pieces of furniture or art or what's specific to the house or the architecture. So creating these online experiences now, while it's a challenge, it's pretty exciting for my staff. It's exciting for my consultants and for myself. And we're really excited because these events not only will be recorded just for the fall preview, but we're going to try to record them so they're evergreen. So that these are events that we can bring back in February, and we could probably host on our website going forward so that people can always experience a home tour in Palm Springs. So creating more of a year-round program has always been something Modernism Week has wanted to do here in Palm Springs, but the pandemic has forced us into, doing that pretty much on maybe a monthly basis going forward. So that is with the fall preview, and we're pretty excited about that. And as you can imagine, with February, there are a lot of challenges there too, because we really don't know what the status of the county or the state is going to be at that time. So again, the challenge is preparing everything that we can prepare. We probably won't have 350 events in February, but we'll continue on the virtual path, the online experience path, and think about the kinds of events that we can have during February that are safe to the public and safe to our volunteers and our staff. So as you can imagine, drive-in theaters, like Lou mentioned, that's one that we're considering. Maybe the Modernism show and sale is something that is also timed, ticketed, and is spaced out in one directional so that people are able to go through the show and sale. So thinking outside of the box and trying to utilize the environment more than the inside of a house, for example. Landscape tours, walking tours with the Palm Springs Historical Society. Those are things that we feel confident that we're going to be able to do. And again, it won't be 350 events in February, but we're looking forward to continuing to grow our audience, to show them about Palm Springs, whether it's an online experience or in-person experience.
So you've talked about the virtual opportunities you had for home tours. Have you developed what the best practices would be that you'll put in place for home tours?
Yeah, for sure. With the home tours coming into February, especially if we're able to actually have people go through a home tour, it's, social distancing and obviously having People take their temperature, maybe sign waivers, have screen guards up to protect our volunteers and our check-in process. We're looking at technology for being able to check in people from a distance, so paper tickets won't be required. Having timed entry and limited capacity, like Lou has also said, is very important. We might limit the capacity to 4 to 6 people coming into a house at any time. Obviously, we would make changes if it's a family who's been isolated together for months and it's a group of 10. But, you know, I think we're going to be able to space out each time slot for these homes and probably expand the time from like 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. So we're still getting the same exposure for the home. And you know, obviously we want to keep all of our volunteers and staff safe. So making sure that, you know, we're taking into account all the things that the county and the state are requiring of any kind of tour.
So with your virtual programming, do you expect that that will grow your program and brand across the country and even perhaps the world?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really good question. We have a pretty good international base already. 27 countries came in for February of 2020. So we know our database is expansive and extended around the world. I think having virtual programming and online experiences are going to probably grow our audience a lot more, in the sense that they won't have to travel to Palm Springs to be able to go through, let's say, the Idris House. They can buy one ticket for an entire family, and the entire family can sit down in front of a computer or a Apple TV or however they're experiencing their tour, and they're going to be able to go through a home without having to get on a plane and coming to Palm Springs. So we do have a good international audience. I feel like this will definitely be a situation where more people from other countries, Australia is a big one for us. We know that we have a captive audience there, and we really feel like they're going to take advantage. But, you know, like anybody who's doing this in the industry right now, we really don't know the results. You know, we don't know what sells. We don't know what is really going to be the best experience. And that's why the fall preview is going to give us a good sample of how we can look at February. So after our fall preview event, which we have 7, we can look at the data coming in from each of those programs to see which one sold the best, which one had the best attendance, which one was favorable to most people coming in. And like all of us in this industry, we're learning. And so taking all of that data and what we're learning and still trying to create something that's not only profitable for us, and it's not always about profit, but trying to create what is the best experience and what is going to bring more people into Palm Springs or into Modernism Week to see what we have to offer.
So when we're talking about expansion, how may that expanded audience impact how you do your programming? And do you see Modernism Week potentially going into other markets?
Oh, absolutely. You know, again, the online experience really opens it up for anybody nationally or internationally to be able to view what Palm Springs has to offer as far as tours, as far as decor, as far as weather. I think it'll actually have a good result in promoting Palm Springs for the future when everything eases up. I believe that'll cause more people to come back to Palm Springs. But Modernism Week does have a goal, and we've been working on this for years, to go into other areas nationally and internationally to help other nonprofits and other nonprofit event coordinators build community through preservation. So we're looking at opportunities in the future to be able to go into Long Beach or go into Columbus, Ohio, or to go into other areas around and sharing our 15 years of experience in developing programs that work, programs that build community, and programs that will bring people to understand what you have in your community. And that is definitely a long-term goal that we have currently. And we do have a lot of people reaching out to us nationally and internationally asking for our advice. And it's so exciting to know that we are in a position to be able to help people know what works and doesn't work as far as the type of events that we know people like. Maybe they might need help with their ticketing system or customer support. These are things that we've become experts in over the year. And while we do it well here in Palm Springs, we really feel like we have it in what we do and the ability to go in and help other communities build like we've built here.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So maybe not something so exciting, but what has the pandemic's impact been on your ability to sell sponsorships?
Great question. Well, it's definitely had an impact. I mean, I don't think there's anybody out there who would tell you that, sponsorships are still coming in at the level they were when you could have in-person events. But, we've been doing this for over 15 years. A lot of our sponsors have been supporters of ours for 10 to 15 years. And I'm really surprised at how many of them are coming back and saying, we really want to support you. Maybe not at the level we were before, but they're still coming in at a dollar amount or an in-kind amount that we're used to. And the real challenge isn't so much about keeping our sponsors happy, but what can we offer them that keeps them happy as well? Like, how can we incorporate sponsors into virtual programming that doesn't feel too commercial? And, in the past where it's worked for Modernism Week is we have camp, which is our central headquarters. And it's a 22,000 square foot tent that's up for 10 days where our sponsors currently reside. And so they're able to share their product with 42,000 people that come through. Well, that's probably not going to happen in February just because we need to be a little more responsible. So incorporating links in our website, sharing with our audience in a way that isn't too commercial, and still keeping that partnership that we have with our sponsors is a challenge, but it's a good challenge for us to have. It kind of makes us think outside of the box again in ways that not only we can help our sponsors, but ways that we can bring new programming to our attendees.
So last question. Modernism relies on 400 volunteers who may be a little nervous about jumping on board again this year. So what sort of options have you explored of how to put the event on if you may not have that many volunteers?
Yeah, another great question. We talk about this a lot, and as you can imagine, our 400 volunteers during Modernism Week are mostly seniors, people who are here and they're retired. And when we think about their safety, we don't always just think about them. We think about the attendees, we think about our staff, we think about our volunteers, we think about the community, and we think about the homeowners and the best way to be able to pull off a live event without hurting anybody, but also being responsible. So a lot of that is education. We will have training classes for our volunteers. We'll make sure that we're following the county and the state guidelines at that time. And we're going to put in whatever the state and the county requires, whether it's shield guards, again, distance check-in, and just making sure that we have sanitation stations, we have people there who are able to clean up, and just taking it as seriously as possible, knowing that it's more important to be responsible than it is to be profitable.
Thank you, Chris. It sounds like you are rising to the challenge, and it's really exciting and enlightening as to what you're all working on in expanding Modernism.
Well, thank you, Val.
Thank you. Ron, let's talk about the theater. So for our viewers who haven't experienced CB Rep, could you please talk to us briefly about the theater's programming, the audience, school, and donors?
Certainly. First, I want to say thank you for including theater. Theater is going through such a major crisis, as all arts institutions are, but live theater around the world has come to a virtual stop, and it's been quite a crisis for live theater. So I appreciate that we're being included. CB Rep's mission is to present thought-provoking theater of substance that is educationally driven. We're in our 12th year. A couple of years ago, we converted the old IMAX movie theater in Cathedral City into a live venue with a state-of-the-art stage and rigging system. Our audience is made up of residents from each of the cities in the Coachella Valley. And we have visitors from the Southland that come from San Diego, Orange County, Los Angeles. We have around 5,000 followers. In normal times, we produce 5 productions each season, which includes a youth outreach production, which serves all 3 school systems, school districts. Our focus for our students is usually on the subject of bullying This continues to be a chronic issue in our valley and in other school districts as well. Our conservatory, a school that's adjacent to the theater, it holds classes in acting, voice, writing, improv, and many other topics pertaining to the performing arts. With COVID, unfortunately, these classes have been completely put on hold.
How has COVID affected staff, and particularly the actors and those who work on your production?
Completely. I mean, it came to a total and complete stop. We got through our first week of our third production in the Playhouse, City of Conversation, before having to close our Playhouse. Each cast member and crew lost their jobs and went on unemployment. We also had to lay off most of the staff, while others took pay cuts. It was important to the board that all the staff members that were kept on kept their medical coverage. So to not lose the coverage, which makes me very proud of our board of directors.
So you were quick to start virtual programming so that you could stay engaged with your audience. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked and whether that added to your audience, and if you think streaming is going to become a permanent part of CB Rep's offering?
Well, this was a huge challenge, not only for us, but for theaters around the country. I've talked to many colleagues that sort of went, oh my God, what do I do? This is all new to me. So, but I followed suit right away. This was in March, and I sort of educated myself and my team to sort of figure out how do we do virtual programming. And when that was not part of our program, some theaters actually had some virtual programming going on already, so it wasn't as much of a challenge for them. But we basically put this together in April, and it's a great way to stay connected to our patrons and even new followers that found us through the internet. We call it Theater Thursday. Each week, we present a variety of programming, which includes cabaret, jazz, classical music, interviews with well-known actors and celebrities. Some of these interviews are individual, and some are a program we call Match-Up, which is like the TV show Actors on Actors, where two actors interview each other. We also have a Broadway sing-along program, a writer's panel, and some virtual classes to try and keep the conservatory afloat.
I also understand that you've been looking at taking theater outdoors. Can you talk to the viewers about what that might look like and other theaters that you're aware of and perhaps are working with that have started that?
Right, there's sort of two options that theaters are taking around the country, and it's either going outside, which has been the number one option, and the other is creating sort of live streaming, which is much more expensive if it's live streamed, or working with the SAG union, which is the Screen Actors Guild, versus Equity, which is the actors, a live actors union, to actually film a production. We've looked at all of these options, and although our board of and staff had created a 23-page safety manual for when we're allowed to open our Playhouse to the public, it made sense to have a plan in place that would allow us to move programming outdoors. First of all, the city of Cathedral City just built a live amphitheater outside across the street from our entrance of our Playhouse. That was scheduled to open in March, and then COVID hit. So they've never opened the venue. So the plan is that we would present a program to the city, which we are going to be doing later this month. And it's to present a Latinx series, jazz, cabaret, a Shakespeare in the Park program, and our youth outreach program to do outside. We originally thought of doing the full-length plays outside, but the cost was prohibitable after we figured out all of the costs involved with producing a play outside. So we'll do special events, which we've been doing for 9 years already. And we'll still keep the final play of the season in place called Native Gardens for April for the Playhouse. It's my hope that everything will have be legally allowed, and that we'll have be able to sort of have a little bit more comfort zone with our public to come into the theater with social distancing in place. So we're excited about it. I hope it works out with the city.
What are other ways that you have found you've had to innovate as a result of COVID?
Fundraising. That was clear with the other two panelists that we all sort of had to look at a virtual way. Without programming or subscriptions, we had to think of new ways to raise and needed funding and keep our playhouse alive and company solvent, to be able to come back strong when we're allowed to reopen. So one of these ways is a virtual benefit, which is scheduled to air on October the 29th at 6 p.m. We'll also have a silent auction attached to that program with great trips, amazing artwork, jewelry. This bidding will start 2 weeks prior to the benefit and close midnight the night of the 29th. And so we're hoping that we can certainly help our season in that way.
Yeah, that sounds great. So as one of only 2 equity theaters in the Valley, you have access to a professional community as well as best practices for the safety of your audience, staff, and crew. What are some tips that you've learned through the rest of the Valley's arts venues that you might take into consideration when you're moving towards reopening so that you can do so more safely and more confidently?
Right. Well, the Actors Union basically went full speed ahead with figuring safety procedures, and that's actually changing on a monthly basis because things are changing on a monthly basis. But in regard to our actors, stage manager, and crew members, the union is requiring us to do weekly COVID testing on anyone that comes in contact with an actor. These would include the director, costume designer, the makeup designer, anyone. The results have to be in writing, and that's different than what the county is doing. They do phone calls, so that can't be the county. So we're looking at using a local lab, which will cost us money, but we have no choice if we want to have professional actors on the stage. Also, the public will have their temperature taken on arrival to any performances, whether outdoor or indoor, by the way, and of course be required to wear masks. We have hand sanitizing stations installed throughout the building. We created a seating charts for social distancing in mind for both the indoor and the outdoor venues. As I shared, we created this safety manual with many other safety protocols in place. So I think we're at least we feel pretty secure in moving forward.
We've touched on the topic with your other co-panelists today on the issue of volunteers and how much the arts programs rely on those. What has your experience been, and what are your solutions as it impacts CV Rep?
This is going to be a big issue for all of the arts institutions throughout the Valley. Most of our volunteer base are senior citizens and will not want to work with the public. So that's going to be a challenge. So we've been looking at alternative staffing when we open to the public. For example, students from local high schools and College of the Desert. And we're hoping that getting a younger base, volunteer base, might be helpful to deal with this situation. Now, mind you, there are some of our tried and true volunteers that are senior citizens that are feel safe and okay to volunteer, but the numbers of what we require are much greater than who's saying, yes, sign me up.
So what is your perspective on how local theater is going to survive COVID, and any sort of discussions you may have had about collaboration with others, mergers, acquisitions, things of that nature to keep theater alive post-COVID era?
Well, the truth is that many will not survive. That's just what's happening. It's already happening. I know a theater company that's been around 50 years and had to close their doors. So this is happening around the country. There are many theater, dance companies, arts organizations closing their doors. Some of which have been around, like I said, 50 years or more. I mean, it all depends. It's quite sad. It really is. It's devastating. It was our board's goal early on to try and support our local theaters. So our board president, Joe Giarrusso, and vice president, David Cohen, reached out to the heads of local theater companies here in the Coachella Valley to come together and meet in Zoom meetings and basically to support each other. So this support group turned into the Alliance of Desert Theaters. And now everybody sort of has a responsibility within the membership to sort of take responsibility to create these meetings and to support each other. We met on a weekly basis during the summer, and now we're meeting on a bi-weekly basis. It's like a support group where we could share knowledge and resources and try and answer each other's questions to help and support each other. Two of the Alliance members, Michael Shaw from Des Art Performs and myself, are also a part of the Coachella Valley Leaders, which was formed by Stephen Biller, editor-in-chief of the Palm Springs Life magazine. This is a bi-weekly group for arts and cultural organizations throughout the Valley that are not just theater companies, but other arts institutions like the Art Museum and Modernism Week. I personally have found these to be most helpful in understanding how to move forward in this ever-changing landscape of unpredictable change.
Right. Well, that sounds wonderful. It's great to hear that you all have each other to lean on and sort of brainstorm. So I'd like to just open it up to the panel in general in terms of if there's anything else that you want our viewers to know about what's ahead for each of your organizations, or if there are sort of takeaways that you've all learned as you try to survive this pandemic that are exciting and new additions for the arts and for our community. So why don't we'll go back. Louis, we'll start with you, then Chris, then Ron.
I'm really thrilled. Our new season has two highlights, which I'm both very excited about. One is the presentation of the Agnes Pelton exhibition, an incredibly important artist who moved here in the 1930s and through the decades became known as one of the great transcendental painters. And the work really resonates and comes out of her life and experience being here in the desert. And we're very excited about presenting this exhibition when we reopen in the fall. The show is currently at the Whitney Museum of American Art, and we're the last venue, and we closed the tour. And I'm thrilled to be able to present this to our community. We're also enhancing the show with an exhibition that focuses on her landscape painting from this area that is drawn from our collection and some of our local collectors. And that'll be a great, give you a great overview of Pelton's career. The second and exciting piece of news we have for the fall is just recently the Illuminator Foundation gifted the incredible Illuminator House to the Palm Springs Art Museum. And we'll be working on finding the specific location to install the work. And as it seems now, the architects have decided that the south parking lot of the museum is the ideal location. And of course, this will be landscape designed and designed to accommodate the Illuminator House. The Illuminator House was a commissioned work by a metal company called Alcan in 1930-31. And the challenge was for an architect to come up with a design for an all-metal house that would be easily fabricated and would be low-cost housing. And the design is absolutely timeless and exquisite, coming right out of Frey's training. in Paris in Belgium as a young architect and really an incredible representative of the international modern style. And of course, we know Albert Frey had enormous impact in this community through his work, his collaborations from the 1930s forward. And this also reinforces the museum holding an outstanding archive that the architect gave the museum upon his death, and the beautiful and innovative Frey House too, which we really enjoy touring and allowing our architects, our scholars, and our general architecture enthusiasts to visit, especially during the period of Modernism Week, where it gets over 1,200 visitors during that time frame. So we're really thrilled. We have 2 exciting major events coming up in the fall. So we're, as you can imagine, really excited about reopening our museum.
All of that sounds really exciting, Louis. Thank you. Chris, what are you excited about?
Well, I'm very excited to be on this discussion today. I have to tell you that it's always reassuring to know that we're not in it alone, and that we're all going through the same thing, all of us, all the nonprofits, all the organizations here in Palm Springs. And I have to say, 1, there's no better place to be in isolation than Palm Springs. But 2, it's such an amazing community to work with. And I feel supported, especially in this conversation today with all of you, that we're all working towards the same goal, which is to keep our organizations going, but to kind of keep Palm Springs relevant. And I think that at the end of the day, everything that we're currently doing, we're going to look back and say, well, that really made an impact. And I believe that what we're doing is going to eventually bring people back to Palm Springs because we're so passionate here. So I just want to say thank you to you, all of you, but also the community and the other organizations here in Palm Springs for their support during this time. It's been pretty incredible.
And Ron, with the last word about what you're excited about.
Well, I'm going to tag on with what Chris is saying. I mean, this idea of supporting each other and basically finding new ways to reach out and to be connected to our community is so vitally important. I mean, the arts are what we should be fighting for, and that people are in such a depressing and challenging time in their personal lives and being isolated, that no matter whether it's virtual or whether it's we figure it out outside, or whether when we are safe to come inside and how we do it, I think they'll appreciate it, because the reality is they know how important all of our organizations are to their lives and making their quality of life in the Coachella Valley a better place to live in and thrive. And we're the better part of society.
I would agree with that.
And they get it, they get it. And if we, through this, find new followers because they want a better part of society, they're going to find us.
Thanks to all 3 of you. This has been enlightening. It has been exciting. And as someone who loves art, it's always on my list when I go somewhere. And so I feel fortunate I live somewhere where it's so rich. And so thank you all for working so hard to keep that alive during the pandemic. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us on here.
On behalf of Palm Springs Life and Coachella Valley Economic Partnership, thank you for watching, and please send us your feedback. We'll see you all next week.
For Timo's Air Conditioning, the Valley is home, and customers are family. When we opened our doors in 1998, we had one mission: to serve you better every day. 2 decades later, that mission still stands. And when it comes to AC replacement, more homeowners choose Timo's over every competitor. Hard work, honest prices, and old school values. That's the Timo's way.